perception of the environment within the regulated community has shifted in the last 10 years, where that is their perception. I'm not saying perception is reality, I'm saying it's perception. In my industry, in the restaurant industry, the increased ICE enforcement has not helped with that. And that's that when I'm talking to my folks about what's going to be changing here, I just know that's where the mind's going to go at. I was okay, well, now I'm going to get a $32,000 fine if my 6-year-old forgets to clock out on time. It's happy.
And I can tell you, just based on food services industry violations that we have, it's child labor, but it's also tips. Tips is a big player for us in food services because employers are keeping the tips of their tipped employees. And that is something that we're battling, and we're using that as part of our motive and our drive in our enforcement activities. So we study what's happening with our cases and our enforcement actions, and we're seeing where are the violations occurring, what areas, what is the enforcement actions that we need to take in order to address these issues. So it's very, very planned out, but we have to be resource specific because there's so little less to cover everybody around us.
One of the possibilities I thought about is in these particular cases, should this pass, they would be coming to the commissioners to, as a recommendation from the Labor Department. We could build in a provision to allow the commissioners to adjust the penalty if there's a concurrent federal case or imposition of federal penalties for the same violation. That at least creates some discretion. The Labor Department to bring it to our attention, or to the employer to bring it to our attention that we've corrected the problem, received a penalty from the feds, and ask the commissioners to adjust accordingly. That's just a thought.
In other words, when they did the ALJ would rule on the penalty if there's a hearing.
If there's a
hearing, and then the next appeal from that goes into the Superior Court.
But before it gets to the ALJ, it comes to the commissioners.
Okay,
right?
kind of like
It would come to
like
ADOSH. It would come to if it's over $500, and obviously if it would, if this changes, that I think we could build in something there that gives give commissioners the ability to make an adjustment if there's a concurrent action going on with the feds, something like that.
It also says
provide some, but I thought there's some provisions in there about adjustments.
well, it says not to exceed 16.
Got it.
35. So that sounds as though we could go under that.
Yeah, the department could.
Yeah. So it
I think
doesn't mean it's, well, the way I'm reading it is it's not 16,000 right off the bat. It's not to exceed 16,000.
It's a limit. It's a limit on the top.
Yeah, the maximum.
That's the maximum. And there's some language in here that talks about the different factors that you would be looking at in terms of recommending
Consider that.
the amount. And so that might reduce the risk of
Sure.
double.
Oh, yeah.
But
If it was a floor, we would be having a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I thought you
Yeah.
meant like a flat 16,000 because of one
No.
violation, but
no, I think it's designed to based on circumstances of the case, your department would be making a recommendation
which
and
is
considering any mitigating factors.
nice because we've come across cases where like an employer has gone a few minutes over like one time or two times, and then employers have gone over 200 times and they get the same penalty.
And I'm looking at the factors that the penalty looks at. It's the size of the business, the appropriateness to the gravity, history, those types of things, injury, investigation history, and that certainly could encompass a concurrent investigation by the Department of Labor. And I agree with Steve that there is no way to do like an offset. So for example, if you were issued, member were issued a penalty by the state, and then the federal government comes in and for the very same thing issues a penalty, I don't see any way to offset one against the other if they've already been paid, if the first one has already been paid. Okay.
I can think of some ways, but I'll digress. Yeah, I just wanted my issue to be raised.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's just, that's too complicated, okay, because you're dealing with.
It's important to be part of the discussion because certainly the way that we deal with ADOS cases, there are certain adjustment factors that the staff or division makes, but the commissioners have the ability to reject those or to make adjustments on their own within those subject areas of the adjustment period. And I think here there is room for the department to consider when recommending the penalty, but also it gives the commissioners the ability to make that adjustment if, you know, the employer comes to our hearing and said, here's all the things I've done to prevent it from happening again, and cooperating with feds, or I've had consultation, now I understand what's going on. Commissioners would have the ability to make adjustments there. So what my hope is, it would be really little risk of like double fines, because again, it's allocation of resources that either we have or don't have, feds have or don't. And I think we can hopefully deal with that, or at least allay some fears that this isn't automatic, you know, $16,000.
Have you guys looked at other jurisdictions and how this issue has come up? Where is this, because I know that, I mean, there are other jurisdictions that, I think we haven't had this issue on here because there's such a huge disparity in the.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are jurisdictions where that isn't the case. Have you looked at other jurisdictions and their approaches?
I have not in regards to this double jeopardy
Because
issue.
that might, yeah, and I know kind of the lawyer in me that I can't, you know,
Let it go.
completely control it. Double jeopardy isn't like really the right term because it's civil. And so but I think of what I could do is I could take a look at whether there are other approaches to this in other jurisdictions and then report back at our next meeting.
Okay. I just wanted to raise it as an issue.
No, that's a good issue to raise because, you know, we want to have, before we recommend anything, we want to have an excellent understanding of what we're doing. Is that this is the cap, but it's not saying this is what we'll issue every time. But the risk for the employer is there. Key is hopefully that figure will catch people's attention and act as a deterrent to minimize the risks of violations. Any other thoughts about the retaliation one? So we'll look and see if there are patterns from other states, but I think that the fact that the department will have the discretion to make adjustments in telling that, as well as when it comes to the commission, we can as well. And then it would move into ALJ and on the Superior Court.
I think that should allay some fears because in the ADOS process, the commission does look at these factors, similar factors in ADOS, the size of the business, history, good faith, those types of things. So, yeah.
And then often what happens after that, the employer may file a request for hearing, but typically the cases start with a settlement conference with ADOS staff and ICA legal. And oftentimes the penalties are further reduced. For example, if the employer takes steps to, here's what we've done to minimize the safety risks. We want to have a consultation program to identify other areas of risk. It could be opportunities for the department. So here's what we recommend you do, or a process you implement that reduce the risk of this happening. Here's better information you use to train your supervisors to minimize the violations.
We also do the similar to the retaliation. the sick time and minimum wage retaliation, where we reduce the penalty based on the size of the employer and consider the other factors. So like it's kind of consistent
With what you already do.
with what we do for retaliation. Because all of our investigators are cross-trained and they do all the different programs. And so it's pretty consistent in line with what we do with retaliation, where we factor in all those other things, like the size of the employer, previous history. There's another one, like if they have an anti-retaliation policy, the business may have a policy, but then there might be one random supervisor that went rogue. So I like that there's factors in here we can consider to apply the penalty.
Any other thoughts on either of the two proposed pieces of legislation?
I have some on the retaliation, but I don't know if we want to move on to that yet, if we're still on the penalty side.
Anything in penalties?
I have one question, not necessarily about the penalty, but on the same document. It's just about the, like, serving the, we crossed off registered mail and added electronic mail.
Mhm.
Because I just want to see if we can make that language consistent with all the other programs, where it says we can send it to them by electronic mail with their consent. Is that an issue?
That's great.
So, yeah, right now with all the programs except for youth labor, the employer and the claimant, both parties have an opportunity to choose their preferred method of communication, and it's either mail or email. And so we only send it to them with their consent for email. If not, we default to mail and we send it to their statutory agent. So just, sorry for consistency,
Okay, so with the party's consent?
for electronic mail, yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
It's just I got rid of registered now. There
Yeah.
is no such thing anymore.
well, I think it's the same thing as certified, isn't
That's
it?
correct.
Okay, so
That's correct.
we've always,
They don't
so,
call it that anymore.
I know, I had to look it up. I'm like, what is the difference here? But it's the same thing. But all of our youth labor, we have to send by certified mail, but all of our other programs, we send by regular mail. Or if they choose email as their preferred method. But
So the key is we want to do what you're already doing in the other area.
that would be nice.
We just want to expand that a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, thoughts on penalties? Do we have anyone online with us?
No, not yet.
Not yet, okay. All right. Well, we have a little bit more research to do on this, but we'll keep these in the parking lot. That it looks like a good candidates where we can find consensus on recommending once we address some of the other questions. So it wasn't so draconian at all as you thought it might be to be. So I think the key is looking at the factors that you're setting a limit, but you're also creating a discretion based on the circumstances of each investigation that the department will use before it even gets to the commissioners. And then we have that safety car as commissioners as well.
What I based it on, so you know, is not only the federal penalty statutes, but also the rules, which I copied and used liberally. So it's all, and Darcy, I hope I got
It's
it.
never plagiarism when an attorney does it.
That's right. It's called research.
As you cite it correctly.
That's right.
As long as you don't use AI
Yes.
without checking the sources.
Retaliation, what I did was to create a new statute here, which we did not have. But there is an anti-retaliation statute in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which deals with child labor. So I cribbed off of that. That's 29 U.S.C. 2016B. And I cribbed off of that, and I also took advantage of your field assistance bulletin on retaliation. And then I cribbed off of our own Arizona anti-retaliation statutes and the Fair Wages and Healthy Families Act.
which we see fairly regularly before us as commissioners.
Yes, and I can imagine. Okay, so,
The presumption is where we would have the biggest problem.
okay, now, that is where, yeah, I represent employers as well as employees, okay? And that presumption snuck into the initiative. And when I first read Proposition 206, and I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, it is the biggest exception to employment at will that we have in our phone. Okay, that is the biggest. And the thing is that the presumption really gives teeth to an anti-retaliation statute. And the thing is if you have protected activity and within 90 days, something adverse happens to you, the presumption says that it's presumed that you retaliated because of the protected activity. The only way to overcome the presumption is by clear and convincing evidence. The people of Arizona wanted this because Prop 201 passed 2-1. Or Prop 206 passed 2-1. Okay. Thing is that if you want a retaliation statute with teeth, that's why I put it in. I know it's tough. Okay, it's tough. But you know, if you want something that means something, that doesn't.
It's a cost driver. So look at 206 and then go look at our employment practices, insurance premiums. It's a direct cost driver, whether you're a bad actor or not a bad actor.
You mean for EPLI insurance?
Correct. So I mean, it's a cost impact. It's just the reality of it. The other thing is you're also creating a private right of action with the 2-year filing window. So now we're dealing with the 1 year, 364-day filings
Mhm.
and hoping that our records are still there and that we're able to come and meet that legal standard.
Well, there is a 2-year private right of action under the federal law too.
I understand. I can't control federal law, right? Like we're talking about what we can do here in Arizona.
But I thought I heard that one of the things that we'd like to do to help employers, not just employees, but employers, is to have a federal law and a state law that are pretty much the same. So they don't get bit by either one. Because that's the problem now. And that's not fair to employers to have 2 laws applicable to them that don't match. So that's why what I did was I looked at, 29 USC 216. And I said, okay, there's a 2-year private right of action there. The presumption though, you can blame me for that one, that came out of Arizona's Prop 206. But the 2 years private right of action comes right out of the federal.
Sure. No, I 100% agree. I think that we just see when there's private right of action allowed under state law, and there's also a private right of action allowed under federal law, the trial attorneys prefer to take advantage of the state law on doing that. And one, it's cheaper to file in state courts than federal courts. And that's just what we see it with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We saw that until Arizona amended their laws a little bit ago that like 90% of the cases were being filed in state court. And then once we closed that fast lane loophole, it got a little bit more equal on the state to federal side. I'm bringing it up as a concern. And when you pile that presumption on top of the private right of action, I think it really creates some pressure on the industries.
Thoughts?
My thought is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. with respect to federal law and state law when it comes to a private right of action. I think a child or her parent should be able to have that private right of action in Arizona and not be limited to an administrative remedy for child labor violations. And the presumption is something that, you know, again, I put that in to be same as the retaliation that, you know, Melissa's department deals with all the time. And, you know, I realized these are draconian, what can I say, they're tough. But yeah, I mean, a lot of your small employers don't even have APL insurance, do they? They can afford it. And the thing is that, you know, the whole purpose of having an anti-retaliation statute is to scare the hell out of the potential retaliator. Okay, that's the whole reason to have one. So that it doesn't happen.
I agree with the purpose of it. I think there's one thing that, again, we keep piling on. So it's not one individual. It's, you've got the presumption clause, you've got the private right of action. Look, on the own, okay, it's probably a little bit more dealable. When you stack those two on top of each other, I mean, Lisa, you probably see those class actions against your clients all the time as well, right? I mean, there's plaintiff hunting that goes on. I mean, we see it all the time. In the ADA case, 2 lawyers ended up getting disbarred because of it, because of the practice they were doing. But that was only after businesses had paid out millions of dollars in settlements, because they always offer you a settlement right below your deductible.
I think that was the ADA Title III that they were going around, the attorney went around.
The signage, yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that there's been trolling with respect to paying overtime and that type of thing too. I know who does it. And thing is there's no way to prevent that except to go after these folks with respect to discipline from the state bar. But the thing is that with respect to these types of situations where we're dealing with young people, we're dealing with minors here, and we're dealing with people who are going to lose, and their families are going to be gone after for what the child complains, and his parents are going to lose their jobs. And this is a real problem. And that is what, you know, that's more common than having these trolls out there looking for cases, plain fine.
What I'm hearing us say is that there's some consensus that this issue of presumption is an important issue to look at, and we're not making any final recommendations today on this, but it's also an issue that's, I think, we're allowed to get additional input from the members of that task force who aren't here today to see what their thoughts might be.
Sure.
But I hear what you're saying. And so it's, you're identifying valid concerns of employers. And, but you're also identifying valid concerns, again, being consistent with other statutes that we deal with. And we see that so much in the Prop 206 litigation, but let's just, we've identified presumption is going to be an issue where we need more guidance, input, and comments before we make a recommendation on that. But it's here in the draft, but it's going to be
I did have one other clarifying question. It seemed to me that the definition of discrimination and retaliation are fairly identical. Is there a reason we're calling them out separately?
Because of the way in which the 216, if I'm not mistaken, talks about that. Let's see. Oh, forgive me. No, it's the field, field assistance program talks about discrimination and retaliation differently, but the courts talk about discrimination and retaliation differently. Okay? Discrimination can happen when the person's still employed, when the employee is still there.
Mhm.
Okay. Retaliation can also happen while the person is still there. Ordinarily, it happens after the person is no longer an employee. The retaliation can happen then. Discrimination, however, does not happen after the employee leaves. That's done. Now the employee's gone. So the thing is that the way that I've got it here for your consideration is an adverse action against either the minor employer or the minor employee's parent or guardian because they engaged in protected activity while the minor employee or parent continues to work.
Yes.
Okay, so the discrimination happens while they're there. Now, retaliation happens either during the time they continue to work or after they've stopped. So discrimination doesn't happen afterwards. Retaliation can, of course. And the way I'm envisioning this, if I may, is child complains, okay, child gets fired, and then parents continue to work, and then they get fired because their kid complained. That's the type of thing.
So yeah, so
Retaliation.
retaliation is inclusive of discrimination.
Yes.
There's the definition there.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I guess the other aspect here, and this is probably industry specific. I don't know how much the grocery stores or other people are doing at it, but and I'm sure you've probably seen this at the commission level with the 90 days on the minimum wage and paid sick time side as well. 90 days is a full season. And so we make routine staffing changes over those seasons. You know, for instance, after Mother's Day, it's a completely new game in the restaurant industry in Arizona, right? There's going to be fewer full shifts, things like that. And now you're in a situation where somebody makes a complaint in April, and then you make a routine staffing adjustment in June, and it's going to be viewed presumptively as an adverse action. That's very hard to deal with, because now the situation employers, to be fully protected, is they have to get primo placement to this employee, whether they're a top performer or not, merely for the fact that they filed some sort of complaint under a protected practice.
Would they negate the presumption if, you know, there were other people whose hours changed or employment ended after Mother's Day because of the drop in business, not just that? Either one person made a complaint. I mean,
That would
what
fall
I
under
would
the
argue.
clear and convincing. It would be
Yeah.
part of that.
Right.
But that's by itself doesn't negate it, because if my overall hours dropped, even though everyone else has also dropped, that doesn't negate that it was an adverse action. I've got to
Right.
bring more to the table than that.
If I may, let me help on this, because again, I represent employers too.
Sure.
And one of the things that, and I'll just tell you, I had one employer plant that I said, okay, we've got to be really careful about this. And I was told, don't worry, we always have a clear and convincing reason to get rid of somebody, you know. The thing is that it forces you to think about it, okay? As an employer, you say, okay, if my hours are gone or the season's over, that's clear and convincing reason to get rid of this person, okay? That's easy. That's easy. What's not easy is when this person is terminated and all of their colleagues are not, okay? And then it gets a little dicey, because you go, okay, do I have documentation that this person was a poor employee, they were dropping the product on the floor, you know, what is going on? And what what this does is have your members train their supervisors that if somebody is not doing a good job, get rid of them right away. You know, you don't wait until the end of the season. Oh, well, okay, you know, and it's tough, but it happens. So my feeling is to help on this. End of season, clear and convincing, easy. Easy. That's an easy one. Okay. The harder one is when hours are given to the favored employee, but the one who complains a lot gets fewer. That's harder. And if the one who complains a lot is a lousy employee, you better have.
And I think that's where the issue comes in, at least in this industry. Again, you've got a 2-year filing time. And that person's supervisor might not be working. You know, the location might not even be open anymore.
Right.
And so it gets difficult to make sure all of them. I mean, you're talking about a very heavy administrative overhead per head count to ensure that you are in a defensible position for an X% chance of this occurring in the next 1 year and 364 days.
Well, and candidly, you know, 30 years ago, I would have said, yeah, you're absolutely right. But today, with these and cell phones and all this stuff, I mean, heck, yesterday I went out to eat breakfast and my order was taken on one of those little computer things, and you know, our server was, she was funny, she says, I don't even know where scrambled eggs are, you know, but it's on there. Today, keeping track of what's going on, there's no excuse. We don't have people writing things down anymore. It's all electronic and it's easy, and every one of these people has a cell phone and they're apps. So, sorry, I understand where you're coming from, and believe you me, my employer clients were saying, yeah, I should have documented that. Well, yeah, but today it's easy to do.
So Denise, if we pass this, we're gonna see a whole bunch more robots, doing surveying. So
Well,
there won't be.
that's a concern already. That's a concern already. But, yeah, I just feel, I want to be comforting with respect, you know, on this. I mean, the whole idea is to get these folks attention.
My comments are noted.
I didn't see 2 years in here. Where, I saw 1 year.
It's the price per private right back.
Oh, okay. And then,
Yeah, Steve touching E.
Yeah.
Ballot determinant. Finger drill.
I'm kind of torn too, to be honest. I like the idea of the presumption because of the sick time minimum wage. But I get your concerns, but with youth labor, there was a point in time where employers didn't respond at all, give us any of their records, and we didn't have enough records. We couldn't really do much of an investigation. They wouldn't let us on site. We couldn't do anything and nothing would happen. It was just no violation.
No violation by obfuscation.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't give us anything, there's nothing, so I kind of like the idea of the presumption because I think with retaliation, a lot of cases do fall under the presumption, but a lot of employers are pretty good about proving the clear and convincing, like if it was seasonal and they laid them off or, yeah, well, except for the ones that don't keep records, but Prop 206 also has a requirement where they have to maintain the records for 4 years. I don't think youth labor, well, I didn't see it anywhere in here either about a record keeping requirement, so that might be a concern as to whether or not they still have records.
They already have that under other rules.
Okay.
Yeah, that's already there. That's in, 520-1210.
Is it the 4 years like Prop 206? Oh, okay.
Every employer.
From a federal perspective, have you seen, what is the experience that you've seen in terms of, or if you have seen any retaliation cases?
For retaliation, we haven't seen recently retaliation.
It has been a while.
It has been some time, but we do take a very strong stance under retaliation under the FLSA. So I see why Denise went to the FLSA and feels it's important to look at it because it's very strong. It's very clear if you're engaging in that protected activity, the law is very clear. Like there's no gray area around it. And we take action. So it's not something that there's no wiggle room to.
Again, there's the real, one of the real goals from my perspective is simply knowledge and deterrence. And that's where we see a lot of issues arising in worker safety. In labor cases, the employment has become much more transient, and sometimes training has fallen by the wayside in terms of understanding what the state and federal laws are. And it's and with our penalties being so small, it's like a cost of doing business. But it's I think it is an issue where if we do not have a retaliation provision, to me that's a gaping hole in state law. But I understand.
And I'm not against the
I
anti-retaliation.
understand your concerns.
There's provisions I have issues with.
Okay.
The overall, everything else,
I gotta admit, I made it extra tough. I made it extra tough. It's your kids.
sure.
Means
So,
you're not
I
gonna
mean,
get
that,
served at any more fast food restaurants.
but I mean, that raises a larger question. Should they be working?
Want them to be working. I mean, that's something that under the federal labor laws, we encourage younger, greener workers to work, but there are limits to what they can do. And that's why our hazardous occupation orders are there. That's why our limitations for work hours are there for 14 and 15-year-olds, 16 and 17-year-olds. They can work as many hours as they like. Under the federal law, there's no limitation. But for 14 and 15-year-olds, we can't have them working at 12 o'clock midnight for a fast food services restaurant and end the shift at that time. Bad things happen at night, and then they have to go to school the next day, and then they're sleeping at school the next day. So those are considerations that we're looking at, and just the reasoning we're getting from employers that I just don't have the labor force available to do this work, and I have to recur to my younger workers to do this, it's not cutting it. So that's why we're sending this clear message with the CMP assessments. We also use other tools like enhanced compliance agreements, for example, as part of our investigation, statements of compliance as well, to get this training out. Also provide compliance assistance to our employment community as well. This is what you need to do. Make sure your managers and your supervisors are engaged and aware of what the child labor rules are so that this doesn't happen again once it does happen. So that's just part of the stuff that we do.
Thoughts on the draft statutes? I did want to see what sort of feedback we have when comparing the Arizona and the feds. This was great information that I had not seen before. It really outlines just interesting areas where the differences between the feds and the state. I think it provides opportunities, I think, for a deeper dive if people want to get in there. But this is, I think this is going to be continuing education from commissioner colleagues. On board, but I appreciate all the work. And I was just, I was fascinated. The other thing that really struck home for me is that, an employer who disregards what the federal laws are puts themselves at risk in terms of, where there's a conflict. But I was surprised at some of the differences. I like what the state did in terms of trenching and excavation, because there's some of the worst cases that we see from data. So that was it's really well done. You're not spreading out the 24 pages of all these mentions, but I just wanted
So I
to,
brought my friend here with.
I just wanted to get any comments or feedback from in looking at these areas and whether there are specific areas members of the task force want to work on or avoid working on, or any areas that we need to look at where we ask for changes in state laws. So anything from the department's perspective that might seem more as a primary for us to look if we wanted to conform to the federal requirements.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a clarification. I think we went over this last meeting, but on the work hours for 14 and 15-year-olds, because I see on here that Arizona doesn't state when the hours can be, it's just the maximums, right? The daily and the weekly maximums, but federal says 14, 15-year-olds cannot work during school hours. I think we talked about how would that be determined, like what the school hours are, if they're in a charter school or a private school, it might be different than the school district. And my recollection was that for enforcement purposes, you just look at whatever school district they're in, not their actual school hours, right?
Right, it's whatever the local public school hours are.
Okay.
So like if they're homeschooled, for example, we would look at what, like you said, what school district they live in.
But for instance, if I went to a private school that started at 7 a.m. instead of the school district starting at 8 a.m., so I got an hour earlier and got to work at 3 instead of 4, that would still be enforceable because it's still within the school district school hours.
It would still be enforceable, but I don't think we would do anything about it. I mean, I do most of the child labor cases that come into our office, and I would not penalize an employer.
Something like that rolls across your desk too.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
on the school hours, I took a few minutes to look up the rule that you have on that, okay? In the CFRs, and it says the district in which the minor lives. And the interesting thing there is that every school district here in Arizona, and we've got 200 plus of them, has a website, and they all have the calendar on it. So the young person, when they apply for work, one of the things that is possible for employers to do is to, you're going to get the address anyway, and figure out, okay, what school district are you in? And maybe that's something that you can plug your computer in and look at Google and say, okay, what school district is this? And those are the hours, because every school district has calendar with the hours. So that should be part of the application. And to me, this is the way to deal with this, as opposed to our group trying to come up with something different than what the federal government has. Because unlike, and I've got to take back what I said a couple of times ago about, well, maybe we could do a rule change, at the federal level, but doing that is a heavy lift. Okay. Yeah, that's a heavy lift.
It's worse than ours.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier here in Arizona to do a rule change, but I'm thinking out loud that maybe the thing to do is to suggest from the state labor department as part of our outreach, because I think that's very, very important. That to have outreach to employers in the state, and it needs to come from every agency, not just the industrial commission. But as part of the application process for any child who's 14 or 15, is you have to say school district in which they live.
In other words, when the kid or the parents are completing the application, there's a space there where they identify the school district in which they reside, whether or not they're going to school there, but what school district you live in. And that way the employer, although
Gets the employer off the hook.
the employer,
Gets the kid off the hook too.
if the employer has kids working from 10 different school districts, they might have differing hours depending on where they're.
For shared custody situations where you're not sure if they have 50-50 custody and they're in two different districts, does it then default to where they're attending school? But
Yep.
that's complicated too.
It can be, many school districts run on the same schedule. Yeah, the major districts and major, cities all work on the same schedule.
That does bring up one other point, and I'm sure it's probably the same, just you're gonna use common sense, right? Solves 99% of the problems out there. But within the school district, you have schools that have differing start times and end times. So is it kind of the outer bounds of the different times within the district that you're looking at as the governing times? Or are we drilling down to the individual school level?
No, so. If you want.
Yeah, go for it.
So usually there's like a schedule that schools follow,
Mhm.
the start time and the stop time. I know that specific schools have different schedules.
Mhm.
So we just want to make sure that the minors that are working, they work outside of those general school hours. We have these specific times, but it's really, really general. So if it's from 7 AM to 3 PM, or
So it is kind of the outer bounds. that
it's
you're
the
looking at.
outer bounds, because usually we don't allow, we see minor workers working past, they start working at 4 PM. And then they stay working until 7 PM that day, from Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday. So it just depends what, it's circumstance specific, but we want to make sure that they're really out of those bounds. They're not working in the middle of school.
Right. They're not missing school so they can go to work.
At the state level, we don't, our statutes don't really care what time of the day they're in.
Right,
they're
it's just the
working.
maximum.
Yeah, just the maximum, but we would look at the exact school that they go to or the outer bounds of, like, yeah, if they have the majority, like, Peoria Unified, the majority of their schools started, well, their high schools started 7:20, but I think they have like 2 schools that start a little bit later. We would use the 7:20. So I think it's up hours. Like what time?
Are there areas where we might want to change state law? Conform with federal law?
Frankly, I think it's only fair to employers to have them be the same for 14 and 15-year-old minors. Because I think now, a 15-year-old can work until 11 o'clock at night. And the employer is gambling with that. Oh, gee, is the Fed's gonna come? The state gonna come? State comes, my person's working at 10:45. It's okay. Federal people come, I get a $16,000 penalty. That's not fair to the employer.
So would you recommend for those workers under 16 that we conform our state statute to
Yes,
the current federal?
yes. I think that makes eminent sense.
Would that be a big concern for your
Streets.
I think most of our grocery stores and convenience stores start hiring at 16, just so they
So
don't, so they
there'll
avoid.
be rare instances of that.
Exactly. I think there's a transportation issue, making sure they get there on time, but I think most of our in the instances where they're working late when it's during the school year, I don't think most of them are hiring under 16. I think that's usually their lowest age that they're hiring. So personally, I don't think that this would be a problem for most of our members. I think during the summertime, probably more on the supplier side. So the manufacturers and the distributors, they might have a different cap for if people working in the office or working somewhere else. But I would say for the most part, our people are probably hiring 16 and up. So most of these don't apply to them. Would that be different on the restaurant side though?
No, I mean, I think that most people are avoiding the 14 and 15.
Yeah.
As a matter of course, risk.
Yeah, it's just too restrictive, right?
So-
You get 2 hours of work out of them.
Yeah, so if that's something we propose, hopefully there wouldn't be huge blowback because we're just trying to make it easier for employers and kids to understand.
And it makes it easier for them to tell their HR, their hiring manager that we're just hiring 16 and up. It's just easier that way. I think that makes a nice line for them too. But I think it deserves to be clear, I think, just across the board at the same time. So Arizona doesn't have a minimum age for, I mean, obviously people under a certain age can't do hazardous jobs, but other than that, there's no minimum age.
Yep. That's what,
14 from the Arizona Constitution, except for certain, like newspaper delivery and.
Yeah, newspaper delivery is on here, minimum age of 10.
Yeah,
We
but
don't have
other than
newspaper
that, I
delivery.
think it's 14.
yeah,
14 in the state constitution.
Mhm.
But you guys weren't enforcing this when I was young. Made a ton of money in my summers of 11 doing your newspaper.
It's very entrepreneurial.
I was late at night. One of my brother's buddies had a truck and we did all the deliveries, overnight deliveries for the hotels. So we would load up at like
USA
11
Today,
PM. Yeah, we finish up around 2 AM. Good walking around money.
But you're older than 10.
I was, but this wouldn't apply. This was just street, that's just street vending.
Yeah.
Any other areas that we may want to recommend change in Arizona's thoughts?
I think most of them on here are suggestions to change Arizona law, right? I'm looking at the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I apologize if we're working on something
Oh,
different.
yeah,
yeah,
no.
that, and we have this one too, right?
Yeah, not printed, but I have it on here.
Yeah,
But that-
documents, yeah, which is, the overview.
The Excel sheet should be on the first email and then those racks are just.
The Excel spreadsheet, Steve created this and then Darcy added to this. So the one you have is a copy.
I saw that.
Of Arizona versus federal youth employment comparison. That's the spreadsheet.
So my understanding is obviously you have the which is stricter on employers column. The way I was reading it is if federal's listed there, that's a recommendation to change Arizona's law to match federal. And then on the few that it's Arizona, that's a recommendation to amend Arizona, drop down to the federal. And then the greens are no change because they're the same.
Well, yes, but there's more because you may want to keep Arizona to be stricter than federal.
Like the trenching, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one that,
So I mean, the way that I looked at it and kind of like my approach to this was if, unless there was like some like state specific, issue or a state specific problem, that notice is for employers is better, achieved with unanimity, even if there's some minor, trade-offs. So I was thinking, unless there was a reason not to have the Arizona law be amended to be consistent with state law. A lot of these relate to like hazards and prohibitions on employment. I think we could separate those out from the other provisions, like the enforcement provisions that raise other policy issues. But from a hazards perspective, I think we maybe just have one piece that's This is what we recommend, changing an Arizona law to be consistent with federal law. This is the area where Arizona law is more strict. This is where we recommend
They're retaining that.
retaining Arizona law for the following reasons. And then these are areas where we recommend making Arizona law more strict, but just to comply with federal law for notice purposes. Does that sound from a,
Yeah, so like for instance, what you're saying is on the excavation and tunnel operations, you might wanna keep the Arizona
Arizona.
2-foot standard, then move to the federal, but there's gonna be other areas where we wanna maybe move down to the federal.
I think the presumption is that we'd want to have Arizona and federal law to be the same. So just if there's.
Kind of starting from the general, we'll reduce down to the Arizona unless there's a
Yeah.
specific policy area like trenching, which is, that's a huge national and state emphasis program for us.
Yeah.
Gosh. And that would be,
And
that would be one that I would want to retain.
that's interesting, that it's 2 feet as opposed to 4 feet, but we don't, you have to have a trench, if it's 6 feet, so.
Yeah.
Safety. Did a lot of those cases many years ago.
Would this one be a problem for you? So this one right here, so it's the under 18, the federal law doesn't allow them to do retail deli slicing, bread, cheese, vegetables. I'm guessing that might be an issue. I'm thinking like Subway, right? The kids put your deli meat in the slicer.
Uh-huh.
That, I'm thinking that one might be problematic.
I mean, they can do it if they're over 16.
No.
This says 18. Because it's included in slaughtering, meat packing,
Oh,
processing,
okay.
rendering under
It's a
18.
hazardous order occupation, so it's automatic, and that's very important, because anybody under the age of 18, 13, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, they are not allowed to do those tasks because of the danger of the youth injuring themselves or having some type of accident. You don't want that to happen, so that's under the hazardous order, and it's automatic.
Okay, so that would be a call out, I would think. I don't know how many 14 or under, but under 18 might actually capture quite a large group of kids, I would imagine, that are working in sandwich shops and things like that.
So which row are you in?
You're in the slaughterhouse one, right?
Yeah, slaughtering.
Oh, in 20? Slaughtering, meat packing, processing, rendering, under 18?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that's working in the slaughterhouse. However, power-driven meat machines, retail deli slicing, yeah, that.
but if that's a big federal one, though, that's probably something that we need to specifically call out if that's a big change.
Yeah, that would be a big
If we would adopt the
Mhm,
federal standard.
right.
And I don't have the exact language of the federal standard, but my understanding of it is it's the open manual manipulation slicers,
Right.
right? If
Those,
I push a button and stand away, it's not
Well-
falling under that standard if it's closed.
So what the ACO says is that any handling of those deli meat slicers that has the blade that is open cannot be operated by minors under the age of 18.
Operated, clean, or assembled.
Oiled,
Yeah.
adjusted,
Just
repaired.
don't touch it.
Can I push a button?
That could be operated.
And it's kind of all inclusive for a purpose, because we don't want anything to happen that we think may happen with the use. And I think the operative word here is the use of the deli machine, of the machine to slice anything like cheese, breads, or deli meats, whatever that.
That's where we've seen it, injuries, redush and child labor.
Oh, and I agree with the manual manipulation slicers. But we've got pretty fancy with, you put the thing of meat in there, you close the lid, you hit a button, it slices it for you.
So let me tell you this, what if there is, fine, you press the button, but what if there's a manual manipulation that you need to do because the machine malfunctions? And the minor
There's
says,
a
wait,
blockage.
the button isn't working. Let me adjust this or move this. And in the movement of some part of the machine, the slicer comes down and it injures their hand or their forearm or whatever part of it.
It's disconnected power source.
And I know this because I've worked on cases that have minors lose limbs because they were pressing a button and it was a meat grinder. And they pushed the meat through because it wasn't grinding the meat properly. And they lost their forearm as they pushed the meat down because it wasn't handling correctly. So anything can happen, X, Y, or Z. The problem is that in the operation of the equipment, we can't have it occur because that's where it's that's why I'm very forceful with this. with your agents.
Right now, we permit that to be 16 or over, right?
Well, these are between 16 and
16 and 18.
Yeah.
So much.
So that's
So they, in Arizona, they can do it under federal law.
That's correct. That's correct.
But yeah.
And this is a problem. This is a problem, like Darcy says, you know, this is how people get hurt, if they try to fix it themselves. Try to fix the machine themselves.
We've seen a lot like that, where,
Yeah,
like even the, what was it, like a corkscrew auger he was working on, he stuck his hand in to clean up the sawdust because it got stuck. So it's
Oh.
usually they weren't supposed to stick their hand in, but they did. And then he lost his hand and, yeah.
Gosh, yeah,
and that was last summer,
Yeah,
northern Arizona.
that's usually what we see. It's not necessarily them operating it, but they,
Kingdom.
you know, just, yeah, they stuck their hand in or did something they weren't supposed to do, but.
yeah, the moral of the story is that at Subway, you have the meat slice being done by somebody who's 18 or more.
Mhm.
Yeah, and 16-year-old can still work at Subway. Just can't cut the meat for the sandwich. Meat has to be cut already.
So I think all the changes below that, though, where the federal law adds not just operating, but also all the other details, setting up, repairing, doing all of that stuff. I think that is probably good clarification to add to our laws as well.
Again, that goal that the employers are gonna understand it, and the kids will understand, or the kids' parents.
Mhm.
And I think we just highlight if there's any of the particular provisions that need further discussion, we just we put those at the parking lot. Back there. But I think Steve, the work you did was super.
It was just based on the work that I got from you and labor, so nothing new, nothing original in it.
You explained it well. It's uncommon for lawyers to do that.
This is, just gives you a beautiful template to go from, to see what you want to do. The thing where Arizona deviates a lot from the federal is dealing with variances, because there's no variance in the federal law.
I don't think there what
Variance.
variances. Have we granted, do you grant variances?
we've had one ever,
One ever.
as far as I've ever heard, and that's been about 7 years. So at least 7 years we've had one.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that there were variances because nothing had ever come to the commission, but I didn't know.
It was one back in, the director, it's just not fired.
One variance in the last 10 years. And, but that is something that just, you know, basically,
It seems.
It exists, but it's
Yeah.
not used.
it should be,
Yeah,
it should be eliminated. That there should be no variance from standards that you have either under state or federal law. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So we're gonna make it acceptable. Because we like you.
Well, and I know it's federal government doesn't do it, and it might not make sense here, but we do find on the food safety side, the variances are very helpful as new technology is developed,
Mhm.
right? And the way that variance cycle works is we have to prove scientifically we are able to meet the same safety standard under a new process as what the code was telling us to do, even though it's a deviation from the code. And that does help in bringing new things online and to allow for the industry to progress. I don't know if it's the same type of thing here, but that's just another area of regulation that we find that it's helpful. You know, if you're able to prove that, hey, if the issue is someone getting their hand sliced off, let me walk you through why that wouldn't happen. And then you as the regulator can decide whether we've met that burden or not.
You know, just from my perspective, not wearing his chairman's hat, I like the idea that it's available, because again, times may change, technologies may change, and you want to have that tool to address a particular situation, which might be a catalyst to changing other rules or other standards in that way. I know we have, you're doing ADOSH and the feds propose a rule, we have to conform to it, but we can do it in a different way. And we can show that what we propose is at least as effective as what they're doing to get approval for it. But I think it's probably helpful to at least retain that option. And I'm glad it's not used often. If I put my old city council hat on, I see variance is used for a lot of things that we're not very good at. So,
Usually,
Believe me, I.
they took the authority away from the city council, like Sarsi, and gave it to the Board of Adjustment to do all the variance. It's very interesting results happening.
Do you guys do wreath making too? Because that's also a call out job in the law with newspaper delivery is wreath making, which I find funny.
So what making?
Wreath making.
Wreath
Oh.
making.
Yeah.
That is a funny thing that you bring up, because in the Fair Labor Standards Act, holly wreath makers are exempt from everything. Minimum wage.
They had a good lobbyist.
They had one heck of a great lobbyist.
You put the 6-year-olds.
They had a
When the
lobbyist.
FLSA was enacted in 1938,
Yes.
that was a big deal, right?
Yes.
Arizona has
Very
it.
famous in Washington.
We have no wreath making exemption in Arizona, so it's
Yes.
just.
Yeah, that always tickles me, you know, how, and you remember the P-Biners? They have a great lobbyist too, the P-Biners got, and I'm thinking, you know, it was, I was reading this as a young lawyer, what is a P-Biner?
I don't know.
But yeah, the holly wreath makers, that was always my case. But yeah, I agree that a variance makes sense if you're going to have, as you say, a change, you're right, change in technology, change in the way we look at things, and it would be a way to get the legislature to look at maybe a new law.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that popped into my mind is with so much automation coming on, and kids younger than me are way better at it. Is there a 15-year-old sitting at his house, basically monitoring a system at a business somewhere for, $20 an hour? What are we applying to that? Is he remotely operating the slicer and then, that I'm just spitballing here, but.
That's a good law school exam question.
That's what he's been doing in here, law school.
I think we'll kind of go in this path in terms of recommendations. We'll follow Steve's list, and any areas we want to flag for separate discussion, we'll do that. Make sure we'll bring it back to the fuller task force to see what their comment and feedback might be, to see whether come to consensus on that. But I think really we've been making some good progress in identifying the issues. And again, goal is comprehension and knowledge for employers and employees, and minimize the risk of confusion, and to track closer with the feds. I think it makes our shared investigations easier, less complicated,
Yeah.
and better use of resources.
Yes.
Resources is a very magic word for a state agency, subject to a legislature and then subject to Congress, so.
And I want to add on to Denise's point, outreach and education is so vital, because we can't reach all of the places of business with all of our enforcement activities. So if any of you need education and outreach for your groups, more than happy to help coordinate that effort, because I'm in charge of that.
Yeah, for your
Outreach
conferences or
for-
webinars or
Mhm.
things like that. I know we at the agency here, we're doing a lot with webinars and outreach, both in worker comp, labor, and ADOS particularly. We'll be wrapping that up with heat safety guidelines that are now currently recommended, but it's that's just been a real goal. I mean, Arizona doesn't require work permits for minors. It did in Missouri, where I grew up. And at least that is a little heads up to parents back at that time in terms of what you can do. I'm not proposing that we do that, but it's just kids, there's a lot of different platforms that parents and kids get their information on that feds are doing well. I like your cards and your materials, and those are things that I know we as an agency need to continue to invest in, because that was one of the main parts of the initial discussion that we had is how do we do the community engagement? How do we make sure that school counselors or people who deal with kids and employment opportunities, making sure they have the accurate information, and particularly making sure parents understand, because so many people in Arizona come from other states with a patchwork quilt of regulations, and they'll just say, well, Illinois is it must be the same rules here.
Well, there's a reason for that. So we are competing with states that have sheer materials than we do, like California, for example. So to compete, we're like, okay, we gotta do something with our youth rules website and make it more splashier and, get.
So you're gonna start doing TikTok, is that it?
Well, no.
Not yet?
We're banned from TikTok, but we're active on social media. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, X, just trying to keep the message alive out there and make it more easily understandable for folks.
Another thing too, is to convince not only the industrial commission, but to have the commission convince its sister agencies. When businesses are licensed, at the corporation commission, you get your LLC, you get your corporation. You're to be told, this is a website you can go to for what laws apply. There is such a thing already, I believe, workplace laws and whatever, and that needs to be updated from time to time. The Attorney General's office has information, but I think that when you get a business in Arizona, you ought to know what the laws are. Especially if you've got employees. And this is just one part of outreach. But I think the Industrial Commission's doing a great job already of having stuff out there, and social media is where it's at now. That just has to be out there. So I am really, really interested in outreach and happy to help on that.
One of the areas that we regulate in worker compensation is we give approval for employers to self-insure for worker comp, whether it's public employers or private employers. And we just enacted recommended heat safety guidelines April 2nd. We're in a pilot program evaluating it for like 8 months, but we've already instructed our self-insurance staff that when new applications come in, whether it's the city of Tucson or school district or Honeywell, we're going to be asking the question, are you aware of these guidelines? Have you implemented them? What is your heat safety plan? They're not required to do it, but if an employer says, well, I want to handle my own worker comp matters, but I don't have a heat safety plan, I haven't done anything, I can say, well, I'm not gonna renew your self-insurance. And there you go. So we're gonna be at least getting that message out, trying to get the message out. We also want to encourage employers or carriers to look at their worker comp premiums, and if their companies take workplace safety seriously, whether they have minors working for them or adults, and they adopt these heat safety plans or these other workplace safety plans, they should get reductions in their workers' comp premiums for that. The commission is going to be evaluating that for employers who do adopt the heat safety standards, because we do have the ability to reduce what their premium will be. They look at us with glazed eyes and we tell them, well, you're going to save money over time in the next couple of years, reduce fatalities and injuries and lost work days if you have a safe workplace. But if they say, we're cutting your worker comp check that you have to give us this year, oh, well, that's good, maybe you ought to do this. But I think that agencies have different ways to offer carrots, or just getting information out to employers that we're not here to put you out of business, but we want to make sure your workplace is safe. We want to make sure it's fair, and that you know what the rules are and not be afraid to ask. So, but I think what we're doing here in terms of these recommendations, it's all in the same pathway that we've been doing with worker comp and that we've been doing with occupational safety and health. So I appreciate everybody's work. We probably should still meet next month. I know July is not a good time. Are there days or times that people can't next month? And if you're on a beach in San Diego, you can call in.
Well, thing is you had sent out a
Yeah,
schedule, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
There was initial date set for July 20th.
Okay.
It's a Monday.
And Zoom is available.
Yeah.
Good, because I'll be in Iowa.
Okay, so the 20th at 1?
Let's see.
I didn't get the
It
schedule.
says 1 to 3:15.
Yeah. It's from 1.
On July 20th.
July 20th. I didn't get the email, but I'm not important.
It's just a calendar invite.
She said a calendar invite.
Calendar invites that I didn't,
She said
maybe I didn't respond.
every third Monday.
Oh.
It says
I thought-
It's probably on my state.
I think you
calendar.
sent it as a series.
Yes,
So when you accept one, it added all of them.
Yeah,
It's probably on my state calendar on my desktop upstairs.
Yeah.
it's a tentative thing,
That's
so
it.
you guys could choose and.
All right. Make sure. Is there anything else we need for today? I don't think we had anybody join us online.
Okay.
So, all those who didn't come today owe us drinks with umbrellas. We don't have any requests to speak from the public, so we can declare our meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much. Positive discussion. Appreciate that.